Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time again. One of our favorite shows, This Week with Wendy. The one show, maybe the only show, that talks about the real SoCal estate of mind. With our host, Wendy Ross, who after a bunch of time working at real estate brokerages in Silicon Valley and Orange County decided it was time for something different. And so she did. She created Veracity Real Estate. The whole idea was to give you a bespoke client advocacy at all price levels, something you just don't see in high-price markets like Southern California. And through it all, she's distinguished herself by creating a company of data-driven decision makers. I used to say data-driven divas, but I think that's maybe that's too much here. There's certainly people that have a lot of facts at their fingertips, and today she's going to share some with us with someone else who knows a lot about what's happening in the markets these days. So let's start with Wendy. Welcome.
Absolutely. And, back to the whole diva thing, I'm not really sure how Dimitri would feel about being called a diva. So, yeah, it's best if we neutralize the gender on that pronoun.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, you know me, Paul. I'm always bringing you something different. I like to look at things a little bit differently, and so do my guests, and that's the beauty of what we do. We bring information to light because there are many things that we talk about that the industry knows and oftentimes probably doesn't want you to know, but we do.
Nearly every show.
Pretty darn much. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in real estate. There really is. But, if you know how the game's being played, then you can make the best out of what's likely to be your biggest asset, your home. So, and that brings me to today's guest, Cindy Gibbs. And Cindy is the manager of airports for BridegeNet International. That's a Tetra Tech company with offices here in Irvine and around the world. In her role, she works with airports and air navigation service providers worldwide on acoustic and environmental issues, as well as community outreach. So she's the woman who has the answers. And today we're going to talk about residential noise, obviously. And although we can't help you if your partner snores or your child uses the kitchen table as a drum set, we can explore neighborhood noise. So that's what we're going to talk about and what you can and can't do about it. But before we jump into Cindy and all things noisy, let's take a quick moment and discuss this week in real estate. Of course, this is just entering March, so our first week into March, our sales data is guaranteed to look a lot different from the last week of February did, because there's always a surge at the end of any given month. So the fact that we have 2,296 active listings as of yesterday, and that's only about 60 fewer than we had in February, it still is a trend that we're starting to move up into a little bit more active inventory, which is critically important. This time of year before COVID, we would have had between 6,000 and 6,500 active listings on the market. I will be thrilled if we get to 4,000 this month, but odds are stacked heavily against it. There are currently 897 homes under contract in escrow, and so far in less than a week, 209 have closed. What's interesting is that even though these are tiny little numbers, we're not putting very many under contract, we're not putting very many onto the market, the median price is steadily ticking up. So ignore those headlines that are saying the sky is falling. It's not falling in sunny Orange County. Median price is back up to $965,000. And yes, that is 11% off the peak, which was last April. And I would remind everybody that every year, even in Orange County where we don't have climate, median price ebbs and flows. It's a bell curve, just like the number of sales are. So the median price is usually a little bit lower at the beginning and the end of the year, and it's a little bit higher in the middle of the year. So to have a peak to valley gap of 5 to 7% in median price is normal. So far, we're experiencing a peak to valley gap of 11% from the pandemic craziness. Again, to assume prices are going to plummet, there's no data to support that. If you've got something I don't know, let me know. Call me, 949-870-2424. I would love to hear the naysayers.
Is that the Wendy hotline?
That's the Wendy hotline, people. All right, so back to the market update. So even though we're selling fewer homes, and there is a little bit more active inventory, we don't have as many homes under contract because it's the beginning of the month. Let's give it a few days. If we were to sell out everything that's actively for sale, it would take 2.5 months, roughly 70 days. That's pretty normal. I don't think we're going to stay at this place, though. I think that we're going to show more escrows opening this week, and that's going to tighten up again. And we're going to show that we have, between 45 and 60 days worth of sell-through. And again, a very telling factor is the sold price versus list price relationship is at 98%. So we're still within 2% of giving sellers what they want, and median price is increasing. So again, sadly, It's all pretty stable.
But everybody's been saying prices are falling and people are caving in on the prices, and you're saying no, they're not caving in.
The data doesn't support that. I mean, list prices may be coming down. So the seller's being aspirational, saying I want $1 million and it's worth 900,000. Their list price may have come down, but when you look at what closed, really, if it hasn't closed escrow, then it didn't really happen, right? You know, that's where we measure what's really happening. And in other places, Paul, like in areas of Texas, in areas of Tennessee, in areas of Colorado, they're seeing significant depreciation because they had such massive surges during the panic. I mean, everybody fled to those communities. There was this fervor, and now they're settling back down from that. We didn't have that in Orange County. I mean, yeah, we sold more $5 million plus homes, which was kind of nauseating. But those people have so much money, they're not going to have to bleed out and throw them back on the market. And if they do, okay, so how many people need to buy a $5 million plus home right now? I kind of live more in the middle of the market. So.
And the other shocking stat I heard you say in there is that we have no climate. Don't tell my wife that, who feels like we're back in the Midwest with snow on the mountaintops and freezing rain. And
bless her. Did she have to shovel snow at your house?
We almost did. It seemed like it. I'll tell you what.
I did
had to shovel rain.
I sat on the back patio and we saw the hail turned into something lighter and flakier and went, uh-oh. But it melted in a minute. So I stand by what I said. We're not in the Midwest. We're not in Ohio. There you expect seasonality in real estate. No one wants to trudge through snow to show an open house. That's just not going to happen. You know, we don't have that. So the fact that we even have seasonality in our prices, in the volume of units that come on and go off the market is kind of silly, you know, and I hope to see that we trend away from that because it's kind of silly. You know, yeah, there's kids in school and that dictates when some families choose to move and whatnot. But, you know, I have to tell you, 8 out of 10 of my closest friends like me never had kids. So it's silly. That's just my opinion.
So knock it off, Orange County.
Stop it already. All right, that's the market update. Enough about me. Let's talk to Cindy Gibbs of BridegeNet International. And in her role, like I said, she collaborates with airports and air navigation service providers to, you know, create community outreach programs related to airports, airport noise, neighborhood noise, what people can do about it, and probably even managing expectations would be fair, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love this because when I was a little girl, I was, you know, thrown on a plane without a parent to go visit grandparents and whatnot. So I love that you have been an aviation fanatic for over 20 years and that you started as an intern at the Reno Tahoe International Airport. I love that. And then has worked as a consultant for the last 18 years. I also dig Kara, my lovely chief brand officer with Alta Lunas is here, and she was bragging that you two are a pilot. Go you. I didn't realize that you flew high-performance single-engine aircraft.
Yes.
Look at you playing in the men's sandbox.
Right? That just means it has over 200 horsepower.
Okay.
Yep.
So if there's really crazy wind, is it easier to get to safety with something of that power or no?
A little bit, yes. You're not going to get thrown around quite as much as in the real little ones.
I love it. I'm so glad to have you here. So, okay, I have a lot to unpack here. How was it you fell in love with aviation, and how did that lead to your going into this industry?
It's so funny you told the story about being thrown on an airplane.
Yeah.
And that's my origin story.
Really?
But I was with my family. I remember back when I was in elementary school, and those of us in this room probably remember Trans World Airlines, TWA. It was just the epitome of class.
My stepmother was a stewardess.
Right? The red and the white. We can all still see that. And that was my first experience that I remembered. And I just absolutely fell in love with it and just everything about it and the glamour at the time. And I was actually wanting to be a pilot, and I decided, you know what, I'm actually going to go into the other part of it, which is the management part. And so I just fly for fun and enjoy it. My husband and I both fly, and I'm actually going to go flying this afternoon
so
to maintain my
jealous.
currency. Yep. So
Can you take us to LA?
yes, well, yep.
Kara, why did you not work that out?
One day.
All right.
If somebody wants to know, where do you fly? Do you just go up and just fly around, or do you fly someplace specific?
You know, both, actually. So pilots need to train. So I'm actually going up today with my flight instructor to do my regular training. And then one place that we actually love to go is up to Santa Ynez. You can go up there. It's a little day trip to Solvang, have lunch in Solvang, bring some pastries and wine home, and then you're home in the afternoon. So
How fun.
yeah, we do a little bit of both.
As amateur pilot, do you have to book a flight plan with the air traffic so they know where you're going?
You don't if you're not using, if it's just like today. So today we call it, today's forecast is severe clear. We like to call it.
It's severely clear.
Severe clear. So it depends on the type of flying that you're doing. So the type of flying I do, I don't typically file a flight plan. You can if you want to, but we have what's called flight following. So air traffic control, you can call them up and say, hey, you know what, I'm starting out in Riverside and I want to go to San Ynez. Can you? And they will make sure that they know where you're at, and you have a flight plan that you use, but then they just kind of it's a second set of eyes on
That's
you.
smart. So in case something horrible goes awry, they
Yes.
knew you were there.
Absolutely, you always want to have redundant systems in place.
And not to be too morbid, but I hear about things like bird strikes taking down, large commercial aircraft. Is the same an issue with smaller aircraft or not so much?
It can be, and that's an interesting thing too. Is that part of what is involved in noise and land use planning are things like that. So you want to make sure that you have compatible land uses. Whether it's a residential land use, you're not going to put a home next to maybe a very loud static noise source, some industrial source. You want to make sure that that's compatible. So when you have things like, you want to make sure there's not a lot of ponding around an airport that's going to attract birds.
Waterfowl.
Exactly.
Interesting. And that's what I thought is I love going down rabbit holes. Sorry, Kara, I'm going off script. In the city of Orange, there are those quarries and things over off Glassell, and they've built all those new homes there. So are they closing the quarry, or did they just figure it wasn't that noisy? I'm confused.
So you have to do noise studies, and that's a really good point. So every city has what's called a general plan.
Right.
And the general plan, it's a big document, and it has elements. I believe there's 12. But you have an element, and one of those elements, you have land use planning, you have noise, and so you have to look at those other land uses and are they compatible? So you have to do your study. So if you want to put in a new development, there are certain studies that you need to do. One of them is a noise study, and you go out there with actual equipment, with noise monitors, with microphones, and you record the existing environment. And then depending on what you want to build, that determines what sort of mitigation measures you might have to put in. It might be walls, berms, types of windows, types of insulation.
Interesting. Is that why we see sound walls on freeways? Because that was a requirement to put them through that area or to expand them and enlarge them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, see, sound walls are fascinating. The whole world of acoustics is fascinating.
It is absolutely. I mean, you could just do a whole master class in it.
I love it as we lean into our mics. Okay, so I love that you chose to go into the management side, which is the airport side and all of that. How did you end up specializing in the community engagement part of it? Or does it just go part and parcel when you're managing?
It really does go part and parcel. And as you were talking about, I mean, we could do a whole master class in this. And the founder of our company, what we were founded on basically is the phrase, the data has a story to tell.
I love that.
And the stories were always told in just tables and really basic bar graphs. But we hear, and we don't, and it's really hard to translate that. And so we worked really hard to translate, what do you hear into pictures, and how do you translate that into something that people can understand?
Good point.
So that's really what we do. And so in order to be able to, you have to understand it and then be able to explain it. So really community outreach is a natural progression.
That makes sense. And this may sound kind of facile, but technically speaking, because this is your stock and trade and you're an engineer in this space, what technically is noise and how is it measured?
So noise is, the actual definition of noise is any unwanted sound.
Oh.
So noise is an unwanted sound.
Isn't that subjective?
It absolutely is. I'm so glad you said that, because I live on a busy street personally, and I was talking to my neighbor the other day about noise, and we're talking about the sounds we hear on the street. Loud cars, car radios, sirens, motorcycles, and she said, car radios, like really loud stereo systems, it doesn't bother me at all. She said that's the sound of life, of people living.
Wow.
And it doesn't bother her, so it's not noise to her. It's just sound, but it might bother someone else. So it is absolutely very subjective.
Well, that reminds me of when I lived in downtown Seattle. I lived there before and after 9/11, and the sound of sirens and the sound of garbage trucks and echoing between the tall buildings and all of that, and it was so quiet. The silence was weird. That was the deafening noise. So the door swings both ways.
Absolutely.
Okay, so back to me, because I sell houses, right? How do we figure out what the noise level is in our neighborhood if we want to know?
Well, I'd mentioned the general plan before.
Right.
And the best place, so wherever you're going to buy a home, is look to that city. And that city is going to have a wealth of information for you. So I would, let's say example, you're going to go to Costa Mesa and buy a home. Are you going to the city of Costa Mesa and look up their general plan and look up their noise element? And the noise elements, they do a really great job in these different chapters of really breaking it down. So they break it down first of what is noise? Noise is any unwanted sound. And then how do you measure that? Because it's going to give, all the data is going to be given in decibels. So decibels, that's how you measure noise. And then you measure it on the A-weighted scale. So there's different scales, kind of like, music, there's different scales. So the A-weighted scale replicates how the human ear hears noise.
Oh,
There's
interesting.
a couple different, like the C-weighted scale is like bass notes, but that's not how we hear. So we hear really in the A-weighted scale. So whenever you're looking at something, it's going to say decibel, like A-weighted.
And so is that more the trebly notes?
It spans really what the human ear kind of can hear, because there's there's certain hertzes we can't hear that are too low. Older people can't hear certain ones that younger people can hear. My kids have rings on their phones that I can't hear, but they can.
I had this conversation with my late husband. I'm like, for the love of God, put your hearing aids in, because we're yelling at you, darling.
Yes.
So okay, so I'm so glad you said that, because very, very often when I'm out and about and speaking and whatnot, people say, how did you know that about that city? I said, because I went to their general plan. It's public information, people. Google any city.
Yep.
Los Angeles is going to be a little bit more onerous, but city of Costa Mesa, yes. City of Huntington Beach, yes. City of Anaheim, just Google city of Anaheim, general plan, boom, there it is. So it's a mystery to no one.
And they all have planning departments. So
Yeah.
if you, and I can, as someone that has been on the other side of that and has taken the public phone calls, cities and other jurisdictions are more than happy to get the phone call ahead of time. So if you call them up and say, I'm looking at a home in this area, then if you're looking in the general plan, they can help you look to exactly that information, or if there's supplemental noise studies done. So for example, a developer might come in and want to build a home or something else, and they have to do a noise study. So that more detailed information might not be on the website,
Right.
but the city might have it, or it might be archived.
And that's interesting. My brain automatically went to, okay, so they're going to add a subdivision to an already developed area, and they have to do an environmental and a traffic study. And wouldn't the traffic study kind of go hand in hand with the noise study, because traffic creates noise?
Yes.
Interesting.
Typically, yeah, if you have a traffic study, you're going to have an associated noise study.
I learned so much. I love smart women. Okay, so we already talked about what advice you would give people about going to the general plan. And I would like just your opinion or feedback you may have heard from your interaction with different communities. For example, it's been my experience, based upon feedback given to me by clients, that my clients tend to prefer, if they're going to live near a busy roadway like my home, they would prefer it not to be at a stop, because then it was just sort of the steady swoosh of cars going back and forth. But if there's a stop, then you have the start and stop. Is that kind of a general preference for noise?
It is so subjective, getting back to that.
Yeah.
I live on a busy street, and our neighbors, we had a neighbors that live on the corner. I don't live on the corner. I live a couple houses from the corner.
Like me, yeah.
But we do get the start and the stop, and it is very subjective. And
Yeah.
it depends, where are the bedrooms in the home? Are the bedrooms in the front of the house? Are they in the back of the house? Is it going to bother you? Are you the type of person that can sleep through anything? My husband will sleep through anything and everything.
That's me.
And I will I hear something and I'll wake up, so it is very subjective, but it's good to go and visit the site and understand where it's located, and, be there actually in person and experience it for yourself.
Yes. And I can't emphasize that enough. I have these conversations, these really nerdy conversations with people. And it's not just noise that you really have to investigate when you're buying a home. I feel like I was the first person at my company back in the dark ages when I worked for a Remax that said, if you're in certain parts of Covenant Hills and Ladera Ranch, when the Santa Anas blow, all you can smell is that landfill. And it smells really, really bad. And no one else was talking about it. But that's the kind of thing you can see on the general plan. But also you just have to go and listen, smell, Smell matters. I mean, if it's an environmental smell and you can't control it, woof.
Exactly. And like we've had people, so our company does do the noise studies I mentioned. So they will go out and we work for developers, we work for all, individual people that are building a new personal residence.
Oh, really? Okay.
So if an individual has that need as well, sometimes you're not part of a big development, it's just a single structure, they'll come to us for that as well. And so we've had people that have found our, reports online and have called us and said, do you think it's noisy there? And again, that's not
subjective.
That's very subjective. And so that is absolutely my advice is go out there a few different times. So go out there during the week when people are going to work, when they're coming home, and then go out there on the weekends too.
Right.
And again, going back to that, if your neighbors have parties and it doesn't bother you, that's great. But I know someone that called the police on their neighbor because they didn't turn their stereo off right at 10 o'clock.
Oh, dear.
And if that's the type of person that you are, then you want to make sure that that neighborhood vibes with you.
And that's so consistent with our general protocol as brokers. But it's a very nice reminder.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm curious, one last question, and this, again, it's off script, so feel free to say, no. With all the redevelopment up the Ortega Canyon, up the Ortega Highway, and they took out a lot of the equestrian, which I assume would have been softer noise of horses' hooves clomping on dirt, and then put in roadways and subdivisions and things. Was your company at all involved in any of that?
I do not believe that we did any of the noise for that.
I know it's not airport, so yeah.
Right, yeah. So we didn't do any of the noise for that. But again, they look at a lot of different. So Caltrans has a whole technical handbook on noise and the different types of treatments you can do. So should it be a noise wall? Should it be a berm, like an earthen berm? And trees. And so trees don't provide, unless it's extremely dense vegetation, you're not going to get a lot of decibel reduction. But sometimes it's just you don't see it.
Interesting.
And you hear it less.
That's fascinating.
So there's a whole technical guidance on how to reduce noise.
So people can go to Caltrans website, I assume, and get this information?
Yep.
Look at this. We've learned so much. All right. I'm going to put a pin in this for just a second and ask Paul if you would please tell us a little bit about our sponsor.
Absolutely. I got to put my pen and paper down first here, so I stop taking notes here. Today is proof that you have a wide group of knowledge in a lot of areas and a wide range of experts that you bring in and tap into, and one of which is our sponsor here today, Ford & DiIulio. They're an Orange County-based boutique litigation firm with experienced attorneys from the big law firms. And the partners who founded the company did so on the concept of aligned interests, where their success is tied to the value they bring and not just the amount of billing that they drive up, where they're rewarded for being effective and efficient, and where they engage in the relentless pursuit of their clients' goals, whether in litigation, mediation, or even trial if it comes to that. If that's what you're seeking and missing in your life, then there's one source for it. Go check them out, FordDiulio.com, FordDiulio, FordDiulio.com. And now we know somebody to call for noise mitigation as well here. So.
I know, right?
Can I ask I get two
Yes,
questions
of
today
course.
here.
Go crazy.
One is a bigger question and one's a personal question here. On a bigger issue, as we build up, as we get more crowded, as lot sizes shrink and more density per lot here, multifamily homes and everything like that, that must be driving more noise issues. We're coming closer together, or are we just building better? I remember when my condo was built, they actually built it was a 2-story, so as you came up the stairs, on the other side was their stairwell. So there were two less noise. It wasn't the two kitchens next to each other or whatever here. So are we getting better at building? Probably yes. And are we facing more noise issues as we get more crowded?
We are getting better at building, and there are building codes, which I'm sure Wendy knows a lot about, but there's single family and there's also multifamily. So when you have a multifamily structure, when they're building it, they need to make sure that the noise levels inside will meet the city standards, which I believe is 55, like in City Coast. Somebody said I believe it's 55 interior noise levels.
That's
so that's
what, decibels or something?
55 decibels, yes. Yeah. And so if you're going to build like the multifamily, you need to make sure that the material that you're putting in between those floors will ensure that it's going to be quiet. And so that's part of what we do as well, is that you do these studies and ensure that the interior and the exterior materials will meet those standards. And they're getting better and better. New building codes out, when new building codes come out, that might be adjusted to, refine what's needed. And then as far as noise, again, I don't like to go back to it's so subjective, because to me that's kind of not a non-answer, but it truly is subjective, and what you're what you
think is noisy.
What you think is noisy, exactly.
Right.
I don't think that we've seen it's an interesting question about going from multifamily and what those
as we get denser, I would think there'd be more noise complaints, because we moved here thinking it was suburbia and quiet, and now it's getting noisier because we're cramming more people together, closer, up, round, everywhere.
There might be more traffic.
That is the nature of every work center. So any part of the United States where there becomes a concentration of employers, density follows.
Right.
I mean, that's just part of it.
Right.
So,
or do people just get used to it? New York City, it's incredibly noisy, and they just think it's the everyday sound, or downtown Seattle or whatever.
Yes.
So here's my specific noise complaints. Here's the one issue I had. I moved into a house. I've still lived there. Little zero lot line kind of house. And little did I know that my neighbor had a giant dog who he left out every single day. He went to work, and the dog didn't like being outside, so he whined and barked at every noise all day long.
that's actually requisite disclosure, by the way.
And I went and talked to the neighbor a couple times, said, can I feed your dog? Can I play with? Because at that time I was working from home mostly. And I said, he drives me crazy. And he never stops. And he just shrugged and he said, hey, it's my dog, my yard, and nothing you can do about it. So I went to the association. They said, nothing we can do about it. Called the animal control. Very little they wanted to do about it here. It was an issue everybody shied away from. And I had to wait literally a year until he moved. I thank God that the new neighbor didn't have a dog. But I thought, I like dogs, but I don't want people just buy these dogs, and because they know they're going to be gone, they just leave them outside all day long. Dogs don't like to be cooped up in a little yard all day long.
Right. I would have done the same thing. I would have gone to my neighbor. Can I pet your dog? Can I come over and visit? Can we give him little treats?
A little compassion. A little compassion.
Absolutely.
But actually, if a dog is barking excessively, you could call the police, but it depends upon the city and what they would do about it.
They didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to come over. They didn't want to deal with it.
People are pansies, aren't they?
Yeah, right. And I thought, so here was to me an incredibly noisy thing, and there was absolutely, I found nothing I could do about it here.
Well, if it was an airport, you could have called Cindy. That's all I can tell you.
Right. Or if it was a freeway or something else. Yeah, there are people. So I wonder if dogs are a special situation that people just nobody wants to touch.
I think
or deal with.
I should have another show about dogs.
You should absolutely.
We're going to do that.
Because I would think in suburbia, in house after house, that's probably a common complaint. I'm probably not the only guy who's... Do you leave your dog outside all day when you leave?
Sometimes I leave the back door open, but he's a very spoiled pooch. So he'll go outside and do his business and just check things out, make sure it's okay. And then by the time I get home, he's back on the sofa again.
Yeah.
I really do have Marmaduke. He's like spread all over the sofa. He used to bark when I got home. The head just kind of lifts up his head and goes, hey, That's it. That's all I get. All right. So enough about that.
All right.
Back to Cindy. And then I think you were adequately prepared here, but I like to do my own version of the Vanity Fair Proust sort of questionnaire. So, first question, I'm going to give you a softball. Tell us where you live and what you presumably love about it.
I live in downtown Riverside.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So for those of you in Orange County, that's east.
And that sounds noisy.
East of the Orange Curtain.
Yeah.
It can be noisy. Honestly, I live in downtown, and what I love about it is that I live in a historic district. So every home is different, and it is so vibrant, and there's so much, as my neighbor said, there's so much life going on. It's wonderful, and there's a beautiful Mission Inn right down the street.
I love the Mission Inn.
It is so gorgeous, and so you can treat yourself to a wonderful spa treatment at Kelly Spa, have an amazing dinner at Dwayne's Steakhouse, have a wonderful drink at the President's Lounge, and then right next door we have the brand new Cheech Museum. So it's
That's
the
right, Cheech Marine Museum.
That's
Yes.
right. Somebody told me that.
I want to go.
It is beautiful. It
Isn't he
is-
really into art or something? Cheech Marin? Right?
Yes, it is actually.
Cheech and Chong, right?
It is Cheech and Chong, and I believe it is the largest. If it's not the largest, it's one of the largest collections of Chicano art.
I heard it was the largest as well, which is why I'm super intrigued to go see
Let's
it.
get Cheech in here. Let's bring Cheech in here. How do we get Cheech in here?
Kara, can you work on that, please?
Get Cheech in here.
As the daughter of an artist, that fascinates me. See, you could be like a tourism guide for Riverside. I love
Yeah.
this.
Wow.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's
There's-
really gone through a great renaissance.
There's lots to love about it. And like me and Santa Ana, similar older communities with some gorgeous historic properties. And thank goodness for historic preservation.
Absolutely.
We're going to have Preserve OC on the show before too long. So,
But
yeah.
I thought as a noise consultant, you would be living on the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere where there isn't a pin drop. You can't hear a single sound.
Paul,
Yeah.
the woman flies planes.
Right.
She's
little
obviously
noisy.
okay with a little bit of noise.
A little noisy,
Just
okay.
saying.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So back to you again. So, what, if anything, or anyone is your most treasured possession?
Goodness. Of course, the saccharine answer is my family.
It kind of is
my
saccharine, but
right?
yes,
Is my treasured
yes.
possession, and my family truly is. I have an amazing husband. I have two wonderful children, and I have an amazing, parents and extended family. And something that my husband did, I should say, at Christmas. So if I had to pick something,
I'm liking this buildup.
yeah, so there's a wonderful jeweler actually in Riverside, and they do custom work, and they also have vintage on consignment.
Oh, cool.
And I had been talking about this one vintage piece, this ridiculously ornate pin that just is silly, and it just made me smile every time I saw it, but I just couldn't bring myself to purchase it. And I would come home and be like, it's still there. It's still in the case. And he surprised me at Christmas with it, and I was so blown away and shocked. And every time I look at it, it just absolutely makes me smile, and then it makes me think of him. So
Good hubby.
right.
And isn't it true? I mean, because I know you a little bit socially, just, full disclosure here, people, we have met before. You strike me as being like me and most of my tight friends in that we don't get hooked on things very often. So for you
Right.
to have been coveting that and it sticking with you, it was meaningful.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
God, I love your hubby. Okay, so again, this is potentially laden with saccharine responses. What do you consider your greatest achievement to date?
Oh my goodness. Wow. So
Getting your husband to buy that.
right. Being married 23 years.
Oh, go
Everything is, it's interesting, again, kind of another saccharine answer in that I have, some people around me have faced some very serious illnesses lately. And really, the greatest achievement is, quite frankly, just a healthy family that I'm just so proud of. And they've been so fun to be with and to watch. And really just making sure that they know their strength and their worth is really, I just can't ask for anything more.
I love that. And just hearing you say that, I know that you're saying it not just to your children, but to your husband. And like you said, your extended family, just taking a minute and letting people know how valuable they are and how much we value them. Let's just all do that today, can we? How much nicer would the world be? Okay, so finally, how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach you?
The best way is via email.
Okay.
So my personal email is cindy.gibbs at BridegeNet. It's BridegeNet.us, or info at BridegeNet.us. And that BridegeNet, I was telling Wendy before the show, when the company was founded, it was, the internet was still a little new, perhaps. And it was bridging the gap. It was bridging the gap of that data gap of people understanding technically, how does this affect my life on a daily basis? So, bridging that gap.
I love it. And that speaks to the tenure of your company. So, go you guys for keeping the name and not changing it because it is meaningful. Little things have meaning.
Now, Wendy, you promised you're going to ask one more question.
I did.
It's the most important question to ask today in today's show.
Why am I
I'm
afraid?
told that Cindy has known your producer, Kara.
Since kindergarten.
So we got to get one embarrassing story about little Kara.
We kind of do.
Oh my goodness. Well, one of my favorite stories about Kara is that Kara is an absolute animal lover.
Mm-hmm.
And she will rescue any animal and just has a heart that just, loves animals. And when we were in kindergarten, I was a dog. For Halloween, I was a dog.
Oh.
And Kara looked at me and said, "We're friends."
Oh.
She adopted you.
She adopted me.
That's
and
adorable.
then here we are.
Aw.
Yeah.
What a nice way to wrap this up. Okay, I'm just going to wrap that up with a bow. It's a wrap, people. So remember, listen in next week, or you can listen to our old podcast, just This Week with Wendy, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. See you next time.